The sea was restless as the ship cut through its waters, and so was Ned Stark's mind. He stood near the bow, cold wind slapping his face, as if the narrow sea itself was warning him to turn back. But there was no turning back now. Not after what Jon Arryn had died for. Not after what he had seen in those damned royal lineages. Robert's children were not his children, and the throne sat beneath a lie. He had penned a letter, then burned it. He thought of sending Ser Jorah or even Varys to test the waters, but none of it sat right with him. If he was to name Stannis as Robert's true heir, if he was to trust him, he had to look the man in the eye and decide for himself. So Ned left King's Landing in secret, telling only Catelyn and trusted men like Jory. He took a fast ship from Blackwater Bay under the cover of night, leaving his daughters under the protection of the guards and Ser Barristan, who still bore honor despite the corruption of court. It was a risk, yes, but leaving things to chance at court felt like a greater one. Dragonstone appeared through the mist, like a dark claw reaching from the sea. The sky was gray, the rain endless. The fortress was old Valyrian, carved from black stone and half-remembered fear. It looked like a place meant to keep secrets. Stannis did not smile when he received Ned. He stood straight, hard as ever, with his hands clasped behind his back. "You come to me like a thief, Lord Stark," Stannis said without warmth. "In the night. I suppose the king's hand has grown tired of King's Landing's stink." "I come not for politics," Ned replied. "I come with truth." That got Stannis' attention. He didn't trust easily. He barely trusted his own brother, but he respected Ned's reputation, even if he found his northern honor tiresome. They met in the war room, the great table shaped like Westeros stretching between them. The air stank of salt and smoke. Melisandre lingered near the shadows, saying little, watching much. Ned laid out the truth plainly. Joffrey, Tommen, Myrcella, none of them Roberts. Born of incest between Cersei and Jaime, Jon Arryn had died for finding it. And now Robert would too, if he wasn't warned. Stannis listened without interruption, eyes narrowing, jaw clenching tighter with each word. He didn't interrupt. When Ned finished, Stannis turned away and poured wine. He did not offer any. "I knew it," he said at last. "I always suspected," Ned blinked. "Then why?" "Because suspicion without proof is treason when dealing with a queen." He sipped. "But now you bring me truth, and you come to me personally. That is either the bravest thing you've ever done, or the most foolish." "I am not here to beg loyalty or ask for armies," Ned said. "Only to look a man in the eye before I name him the rightful heir to the Iron Throne." Stannis paced. "Robert will not believe it. Even if he does, he is too drunk and distracted to act. And Renly will make his own move the moment he smells weakness." "And what will you do?" Ned asked. "Will you act with honor, or let ambition do your speaking?" Stannis stopped. "Honor is the thing men say when they wish to be remembered kindly. I will act with law. The law says I am the heir. I will take what is mine." Melisandre stepped forward finally. Her voice was soft and ominous. "And the Lord of Light agrees. You are Azor Ahai reborn." Ned looked at her, uneasy. He did not trust magic or prophecy, not since the Tower of Joy, not since the whispers of Targaryen madness and shadow. He did not like her eyes, or how she looked at him. "I believe in steel and oaths," Ned said quietly. "Not fire and shadows." Stannis gave no answer to that. He only stared at the map of Westeros, eyes drawn to King's Landing. "We will need ships," he said finally. "And I will need proof. Letters from Meisters, names, witnesses. If I go to war, I go with a blade, not rumors." Ned nodded. "You shall have them." Outside, the storm rolled in heavier. Ravens stirred restlessly in their cages. And far across the sea, Cersei Lannister was already tightening her grip. What Ned didn't know was that his absence had already been noticed, and in King's Landing a trap was quietly being prepared, one that would not wait for ravens or for honor. The ship back from Dragonstone moved slower than Ned would have liked, as if the gods themselves tried to stall his return to King's Landing. He stood on deck once more, the salty spray hitting his face. The wind had turned colder, darker, like something had changed behind him or ahead. He had spoken the truth. Stannis had listened. Plans had begun. But something gnawed at Ned Stark's gut, something beyond Stannis's iron resolve or that red woman's unblinking stare. He didn't trust her. Melisandre had spoken little, but her presence was heavy, like smoke from a funeral pyre. She had looked at Ned like she was reading his death in the flames. The return took 4 days, 4 days that felt like a lifetime. When he finally walked through the Red Keep's gates, everything felt different. The guards looked at him too long. The courtiers stopped whispering the moment he passed, and in the hallways, he noticed Varys and Littlefinger were nowhere to be seen. Not even Ser Barristan was waiting with news. Instead, it was Pycelle, slow and wheezing, who greeted him near the small council chamber. "Lord Stark, you've returned," he said, voice as dry as the air around him. "The king is not well." Ned frowned. "What happened?" "Boar hunt. 3 days past. A deep wound. His grace is dying." The words hit like a hammer. He hadn't been gone even a week, and now Robert was on his deathbed. He stormed to the king's chambers. When he entered, the stench of blood and rot nearly overwhelmed him. Robert Baratheon lay pale and bloated on the bed, his body wrecked by fever. Renly sat nearby, face taut with tension. Cersei stood beside the bed, looking more bored than mourning. Joffrey loomed behind her, smug and untouched by grief. Robert turned his head slowly, his eyes cloudy, his voice barely a whisper. "Ned, I'm here," Ned said, kneeling beside the bed. "You shouldn't have gone without guards." Robert tried to laugh, but it came out as a rasp. "Wine. Too much wine. And the damn squire. Where were you?" Ned's face hardened. "I was securing your legacy." He slid a parchment from his cloak. "This is your will, Robert, signed before the maester. It names your heir, not by name, but by law." Robert weakly reached for it, but his hand shook too hard to hold it. "Make sure Joffrey sits." "I will," Ned said. But he didn't look at Cersei. The queen's eyes narrowed. She said nothing. Not yet. That night, Renly came to Ned's chambers. The younger Baratheon was tense, agitated. "You shouldn't have left," he hissed. "Cersei has the city watch. The moment Robert dies, she'll make her move." "She won't act without proof of strength," Ned replied. "She already has it. Joffrey's being groomed as king already. The lords are flocking to her side. We need to act. Tonight, take Joffrey into custody. Name Stannis king." Ned shook his head. "Stannis is the rightful heir. But I will not steal a boy in the night and start a war." Renly's eyes flared. "Then you'll lose." He stormed out, and once again, Ned Stark was alone with his honor. By dawn, Robert Baratheon was dead. The bells rang, the banners were lowered, and chaos began to spread like wildfire in dry grass. Ned sent ravens, one to Dragonstone, one to Winterfell, and he summoned Littlefinger. "I need the city watch," Ned said. "You'll have them," Littlefinger promised with his usual slippery smile. "Gold wins loyalty, my lord. Yours will be the heavier purse." But as he turned to leave, Ned caught something strange. A flash of guilt or calculation? He didn't know then that Littlefinger had already spoken to Cersei. That afternoon, Ned presented Robert's will to the small council. Cersei took it from his hand, read it slowly, then tore it in two. The king is dead, and Joffrey is his son. He sits the throne now. You know that's a lie, Ned said. I know power, she replied coldly. And I know you do not have it. Ned turned to Sir Barristan, to Varys, even to Pycelle, but they said nothing. So he took his final gamble. He marched into the throne room, flanked by guards loyal to him. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne already, smug, with Cersei behind him. The Hound stood nearby, hand on his blade. Ned took out the scroll declaring Stannis heir. He raised it high. I, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Hand of the King, declare that the boy Joffrey Baratheon is not the rightful king. The true heir to the Iron Throne is Stannis Baratheon. Gasps. Murmurs. The sound of steel unsheathing. Then came the betrayal. Littlefinger stepped up beside Ned. You should have listened to me, he said softly, and he put a dagger to Ned Stark's throat. The moment the dagger touched his throat, Ned Stark knew he'd been played. Not just outmaneuvered, betrayed in full. Littlefinger's words hung in the air like poisoned mist. You should have listened to me. The throne room erupted into chaos. Sir Barristan Selmy, stunned but too rigid with oath and honor to move, stood frozen. The gold cloaks, the city watch, turned not to Joffrey or Cersei, but to Ned. Swords drawn, halberds pointed. Every face he thought he could trust twisted with cowardice or greed. Seize him, Cersei ordered calmly, her voice louder than the shouting lords. Joffrey sneered, chin high like a brat playing king. Bring me his head if he resists. Ned didn't resist. He could have tried, maybe grabbed a blade, maybe fought his way out. But too many men would die. Men loyal to him, innocents, and Sansa was still here. Arya, too. He wouldn't risk them, not for pride. Not even for justice. So he let them take him. Iron shackles closed around his wrists. The great doors of the throne room slammed shut, and the last thing he saw before they dragged him out was the boy on the throne, grinning, smug, a Lannister, clothed in Baratheon gold. They threw him into the black cells beneath the Red Keep, a hole of rats, filth, and silence. The stink was unbearable. He lay in darkness, shackles cutting into his skin, trying to keep his mind focused. He told himself this was temporary, that Stannis would come, that Renly might still act, that Robb would stay in Winterfell. But the days passed, and no rescue came. Then came Varys. The spider moved like a shadow through the cell. No footsteps, no sound, only the whisper of robes and the soft creak of the door. You shouldn't have left King's Landing, Lord Stark, Varys murmured. You created a void, and Cersei rushed to fill it. I went to Stannis, Ned growled, his voice hoarse. He's the rightful heir. Perhaps, but he is not in King's Landing, and that is what matters. Ned glared at him. You're as guilty as the rest. You saw the lies. You know the truth. I know many truths, Varys said softly, but I also know survival. You trusted Littlefinger, and now you are alone. Then why come? Ned spat. To mock me? To offer you a choice. Varys reached into his sleeve and pulled out a small parchment. Cersei will allow you to live. You'll take the black, go to the wall, disgraced but breathing. Ned stared at the paper. A confession, a lie in writing. Say Joffrey is the king. Say you were wrong. Say you betrayed the realm by accusing the queen. They want my honor in exchange for my life. They want your submission, Varys replied. But more than that, they want your name, your legacy. Your surrender is what they'll hold up to make Joffrey look legitimate. Ned looked down at his wrists. Blood from the shackles had dried into dark lines. And if I don't, they'll kill you, Varys said simply. And likely Sansa, too. Arya has disappeared for now, but the girl won't survive long alone. Ned's heart sank. He could suffer. He could endure disgrace. But his daughters? He couldn't let them pay for his defiance. "When is the execution?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Varys didn't answer, just slid the parchment toward him. "Make your choice." The cell fell silent after he left. Ned sat in the dark for hours, staring at the confession, at the lie. That night, he dreamed of Winterfell, of snow on the battlements, of Catelyn's smile, of Robb's laugh, of Arya chasing a shadow with Needle, and Jon, quiet and watchful, at his side. And when the morning came, he signed the lie. The sun over King's Landing burned hotter than it should have. Summer air, thick with smoke and tension, hung heavy over the capital. The city buzzed not with joy or mourning, but with anticipation, the kind that made good men nervous and cruel men hungry. Word spread fast. Eddard Stark would confess his crimes today. The square before the great sept of Baelor filled with nobles, commoners, guards, spies, and liars. Every house sent a representative. The small folk came in droves, most unaware of what Ned had truly done, or hadn't done. They only knew what the gold cloaks told them. The king's hand betrayed the crown. Ned stood in chains before the steps of the sept, clothes torn and beard grown rough. His knees ached. His ribs burned from nights spent cold and curled on stone. But worse than the pain was the shame, not of what he had done, but of what he was about to do. He searched the crowd for his daughters. He saw Sansa first. She stood near the royal box, eyes swollen and red, body stiff with dread. Her gaze met his for the briefest moment before it darted away. Arya was nowhere to be seen, and that gave him the smallest, thinnest strand of hope. King Joffrey sat high on the platform beside his mother, wearing a crown too big for his boyish head and a smirk too sharp for his age. Cersei's face was unreadable. Beside her stood the ever-smiling Lord Baelish and the silent Sir Ilyn Payne, the headsman. Grand Maester Pycelle stepped forward first, voice droning like a bell toll. Lord Eddard Stark, formerly Hand of the King, stands accused of treason and plotting to usurp the throne. Murmurs rose. Hushed, frightened, bloodthirsty, Ned was shoved forward. He stumbled, caught himself, and forced his eyes to meet the crowd. He didn't want to look at Joffrey or Cersei. He wanted only to look at Sansa, to let her know that everything he would say was for her. Varys appeared beside him and gave the tiniest nod. It was time. Ned cleared his throat. "I am Eddard Stark," he began, voice rough but steady. "I was the Hand of King Robert. I served him loyally, until the end." A hush fell over the square. "I committed treason against the crown. I conspired with foreign powers and traitors to deny the rightful king, Joffrey Baratheon, his throne." He paused, swallowed. "I plotted to place Stannis Baratheon on the throne in his stead. I see now the error of my ways. I was blinded by pride, and I repent. Before the gods and men, I confess my crimes and beg forgiveness from his grace, King Joffrey." The crowd stirred. Sansa began to cry quietly. Cersei nodded once to Joffrey, then turned to the crowd and raised her hands. "Let all know that mercy is the virtue of the king. Lord Stark has confessed. He shall take the black and live out his days at the wall." A collective breath exhaled across the square, and then Joffrey stood. No, the word hit the air like a slap. Cersei turned sharply. "Your Grace! He betrayed my father. He confessed it himself. That cannot go unpunished." Pycelle blinked. "Your Grace! The crown promised mercy." "I am the crown," Joffrey snapped. His voice cracked with youth but was filled with the arrogance of power. "Bring me his head!" Gasps, screams, Sansa shrieked. Varys stepped forward, but the guards pushed him back. Ned's heart dropped. Not for himself. He had long accepted death, but for the betrayal of mercy. He looked once more at Sansa and silently mouthed 2 words: "Forgive me." Sir Ilan Payne stepped forward, unsheathing the great sword, ice, the very blade of House Stark. The irony burned deeper than steel ever could. Ned Stark closed his eyes, and, as the blade rose, as the steps turned red, as the crowd turned to chaos and horror far across Blackwater Bay, sails were already cutting toward the capital. Stannis Baratheon had received the Raven, and war was coming. The Raven had arrived at Dragonstone 2 days before Ned Stark's execution. When Stannis Baratheon unrolled the scroll and read the words, penned in Stark's hand, his jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed something deeper: regret, maybe, or rage. Perhaps both. Ned had done what Stannis expected he wouldn't. He submitted. He lied. He bent the knee. And the Lannisters repaid that submission with steel. Melisandre stood at the window, her red robes flickering like flames in the sea breeze. She didn't need to read the letter to know what it said. The flames had told her everything. "The wolf gave his soul to spare his kin," she murmured. "But the boy king drinks blood as if it were wine." Stannis slammed the scroll onto the war table. They executed him anyway. He confessed. He lied for them. And they still killed him. Ser Davos Seaworth stood nearby, silent but uneasy. "It was a warning," he said. "To us, to the North, to anyone who would say the bastard isn't Robert's true son." "He is no son of Robert," Stannis spat. "He is the product of incest. That crown rests on rot." He turned to his commanders. "We sail within the week, every ship, every sword. We take Storm's End back, and then we march to King's Landing. We bring fire and truth." Melisandre's smile widened slightly. "And with fire comes cleansing." Davos frowned. "Your Grace, marching with no allies is suicide. Renly commands a larger force. The Reach bends to him, not you. If you strike now, Renly is a usurper," Stannis snapped. "He is my brother, but he is not my ally. He would wear the crown like a child wears a costume. The throne is not a prize for charm and color. It is law. But the people love him." "The people loved Robert too," Stannis said, his voice cold. "And what did that love give us? Bastards on the throne, wolves in cages, lies. No, let the people fear me. Let them hate me. But let them obey me." Davos bowed slightly but said no more. He knew his king. Unbending, relentless. Stannis would rather die than compromise. And now, with Ned Stark's death, that war had become inevitable. By the time the sails unfurled from Dragonstone's harbor, black smoke still rose from the streets of King's Landing. The city boiled with rumors. The Wolf Lord confessed. The king showed mercy, then changed his mind. Sansa Stark had collapsed. Arya Stark had vanished. None of it mattered. The die was cast. The die was cast. Back in the capital, the aftermath of Ned's execution cracked the fragile facade of peace. Lords from the Riverlands began pulling back their banners. The Eyrie refused to send tribute. And in the north, Robb Stark received word not just of his father's imprisonment, but of his death. He stood in the great hall of Winterfell, scroll crushed in his trembling hands. Catelyn stood beside him, silent, her face white with fury. Maester Luwin read the last lines aloud as if they were nails hammered into a coffin. Robb's hand dropped the scroll. "Call the banners." Maester Luwin blinked. "All of them?" "All of them," Robb said, his voice tight. "Every house that swore to my father, every man who ever pledged sword to Winterfell, we march south." Catelyn didn't stop him. She didn't say a word, because something inside her had died too. In the same breath, war exploded from 3 directions. From the north under Robb Stark, from Dragonstone with Stannis Baratheon's fleet, and from Highgarden, where Renly raised his own banner and declared himself king, backed by the strength of the Tyrells. 3 kings, 3 wars, 1 Iron Throne, and in the chaos of it all, a red, Priestess whispered in Stannis' ear each night, her eyes seeing shadows in flames. "The boy king's rule will drown in blood," she said. "But you are fire made flesh. You are the sword of the Lord of Light." But even Melisandre could not see one truth hiding in the dark. Arya Stark was still in King's Landing, disguised, watching, waiting, and learning to kill. Arya Stark had seen her father die, not clearly. The crowd had been too thick, the guards too tall. But she saw the sword, ice, lifted high. She saw the look in Sansa's face change from hope to horror. She heard the sound after, the sound she'd never forget, no matter how many lives passed between that moment and her last breath. Yoren of the Night's Watch had grabbed her before she could scream, before she could run. He'd dragged her into the alleys behind the sept and cut her hair with a filthy knife. "You scream now and they'll find you," he said. "You cry and they'll know who you are." She didn't cry. Not that day. Not even when the bells tolled. Now, days later, she was living in the bowels of Flea Bottom, wearing lice-infested rags and answering to Aerie. Yoren had her hidden among a group of recruits bound for the Wall, petty thieves, orphans, rapists, liars. She slept with a knife under her blanket and never told anyone her real name. But she remembered it. She remembered everything. She'd seen the men who stood by while her father was betrayed. She remembered Cersei's blank expression, Joffrey's glee, Pycelle's silence, and Littlefinger, the man her father once trusted. "I'll start with him," she whispered into the straw at night. "One day." Back in the Red Keep, Sansa Stark was a ghost. She moved through the halls like a bird with clipped wings. The songs she once sang were gone from her lips. Her eyes were always red. She was no longer a lady. She was a hostage, a trophy, a plaything for Joffrey's cruelty. He made her look at her father's head on the spike, forced her to gaze at it until she broke down. He laughed. Cersei said nothing. The court said less. Every day was a new humiliation. One day it was a slap from the queen. The next, being ordered to write a letter to her brother Robb, begging him to bend the knee. Robb, meanwhile, had already crossed into the Riverlands with 30,000 men. Lords Greatjon Umber, Rickard Karstark, and Roose Bolton rode with him. Walder Frey, ever the opportunist, had agreed to grant passage, at a cost. He did not fight with rage like his father. Robb fought with strategy, quiet calculation. But inside him, the pain was real, and it burned hotter with every mile south. At River Run, they joined with Hoster Tully's bannermen. Catelyn reunited with her uncle, Sir Brendan Blackfish, and urged caution. "If we win every battle, but lose the war, what will we have gained?" Robb listened, but his eyes never softened. Not since that raven. They defeated Ser Jaime Lannister at the Whispering Wood, took him captive, sent a message to the Queen herself. The North would not kneel. The Starks would not be erased, and still, in Dragonstone, the fire grew brighter. Stannis had landed at Storm's End. Renly had fled with the Tyrells to the Reach, naming himself king. He and Stannis exchanged no words, only banners and threats. Melisandre watched from the cliffs. "Two kings. Only one is true. The false must fall." Cersei. Davos grew uneasy with her influence. She burned effigies, spoke in riddles. Her eyes saw things in the flames that no man should see. Stannis, ever pragmatic, tolerated her. For now. "If she delivers me the throne," he told Davos, "I care not what god she serves. But gods have their own wars." And as war thundered, across Westeros, Starks, Baratheons, Lannisters, and traitors in every direction, no one noticed the raven that flew east. Not until it reached the Dothraki Sea. Daenerys Targaryen opened the scroll with cautious fingers. It smelled of blood and salt. It told of a boy king, a murdered hand, and a realm in chaos. Her dragons, small but fierce, shrieked behind her, and Dany smiled. "Westeros burns," she whispered, "and now they remember my name." The cold wind across the neck was already tasting of winter, but in Westeros, fire ruled. Robb Stark stood at the head of a host the South had not seen in a generation. Grim, disciplined men hardened by grief and frost. The banners of the North flapped above them. The direwolf of Stark, the bear of Mormont, the sunburst of Karstark, the giant of Umber. And now, from the Riverlands, came the silver trout of Tully. River Run stood free once more, but the River Lords had paid the price in blood. Walder Frey, slippery as oil, had granted passage through the twins after forcing Robb into a marriage pact, one he accepted through clenched teeth, another debt stacked high on the growing pile of sacrifices. Robb didn't speak of revenge. He spoke of honor, of justice. But his silence spoke louder. His father was dead, his sisters taken, and the realm had turned its back on truth. And still, he would not call himself king. Not yet. That title came from the men around him. One by one, they declared it. In the halls of River Run, they raised their swords and called him what the realm feared most, the king in the North. It was more than rebellion now. It was a breaking of the kingdom itself, and every raven that flew south carried the weight of that proclamation. To Lannister ears, it was war. To the common folk, it was hope. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei read the message in silence. Then she burned it. Her son, Joffrey, mocked the Northern Lords. Let them call him king. I'll call him corpse soon enough. But even she knew. Robb had become more than a boy with a sword. He was a symbol now, and symbols were dangerous. Still, Cersei had her hands full. Stannis had made his move. His ships landed at Storm's End without contest. The castle fell within a day. Renly's forces had fled before the battle, taking their banners west. Stannis entered his ancestral seat with the Red Priestess at his side and began forging his army anew, gathering lords who valued law over love. He issued ravens of his own, scrolls sealed with the Baratheon stag. He named Joffrey a bastard, Cersei a traitor, and himself king by law and fire. The realm now had 4 kings, one boy in the south, one wolf in the north, one stag on Dragonstone, one pretender in the Reach. But in the darkness, there was a 5th. Far across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen stood at the edge of the Red Waste. Her Khalasar had splintered, her child was dead, and the man she loved had been reduced to a shell. She had lost everything, except her dragons. They fed now on charred meat. Their wings grew stronger with each passing day, and so did she. She read the news of Ned Stark's execution with cold interest. She did not know him, but she knew what it meant. The realm was bleeding. The usurpers had turned on each other. Her brother Viserys had died chasing a crown. She would earn hers through fire. Westeros is unguarded, Ser Jorah told her one night. They've shattered into war. Stannis burns men for gods, and the boy king cuts off heads for sport. The people have no one. They have me, Dany said. Back in Flea Bottom, Arya Stark rode north with Yoren and his band of misfits, hiding in plain sight. She trained in silence, watching, listening, learning. Every noble that passed them, every Lannister rider on the road, every careless insult carved another name into her soul. One day she whispered to Gendry in the dark, "I'm going to kill the queen." Laughed. She didn't. In Dragonstone, Melisandre lit another fire and closed her eyes. The Wolf King marches with the river's vengeance. The dragons stir in the east. The Lion Queen drowns in wine and pride. But only one is forged in fire. Only one will cast shadow over the world. She opened her eyes to the flames. What she saw made her still. Shadow blood, a boy with a crown, screaming, and a girl with a face made of no one's. In the final days before the storm, silence gripped the realm. Not the silence of peace, the silence of breath held before a scream. Robb Stark had marched deep into the Westerlands. Every victory against the Lannisters added to his legend, but also to the toll. Lord Rickard Karstark buried his sons. The Great John had nearly lost an arm, and Roose Bolton, ever quiet, kept his eyes low and his knives sharp, but Robb never flinched. He sent terms to Cersei: return my sisters, release our men, admit the lie of Joffrey's claim. She responded with silence. The war would continue. Inno, King's Landing, winter hadn't arrived, but dread had. The people starved while the court danced in denial. Joffrey grew more erratic, torturing beggars in the street, having his guards beat any man who questioned his rule. Sansa endured it all with a frozen grace. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't even plead. Her eyes became ice. One night, Ser Sandor Clegane found her in the garden. She was bruised, silent. "You're going to die here," he said flatly. "I know," she answered. He didn't laugh. "If you want out, you'll need to learn to lie better." At Storm's End, Stannis had amassed nearly 20,000 men. But he lacked ships enough to land directly at King's Landing. Davos suggested a secret route through Blackwater Bay, a nighttime strike. Melisandre agreed, but only if her shadow came with them. That night, in a black cave beneath Storm's End, she gave birth to darkness. Stannis never spoke of what he saw. But when dawn came, Sir Courtenay Penrose, the last man holding the castle for Renly, was found dead. His throat opened wide, though no assassin had breached the gate, and now the way to King's Landing was open. But Stannis wouldn't be first. From the Reach, Renly Baratheon had gathered a massive army of Tyrell knights, bold, beautiful, shining like gold. He moved swiftly, planning to strike King's Landing before his brother. But he never made it. His men found him dead in his tent. His throat sliced open. No one saw who did it. Some whispered treachery. Others, sorcery. Only Melisandre smiled. Now, the realm had narrowed again. 3 kings remained. Robb in the north, Joffrey on the throne, Stannis at the gate. In the east, Daenerys watched from Korth, her dragons now the size of dogs but growing fast. She had suitors, rich men, magicians, kings, but she trusted none of them. The realm was falling apart on its own, and she would arrive when the ashes settled. "Let them burn themselves to death," she told Ser Jorah. "Then I'll come home." But Westeros wouldn't wait. The Battle of Blackwater came under a moonless sky. Stannis' ships crept through the bay, loaded with soldiers, ready to breach the Mudgate and take the Red Keep. But Tyrion Lannister had prepared something else. Wildfire. When the sea turned green, it lit the sky for miles. Screams filled the night. Ships split in half, men burning in the water. Stannis' forces were scattered, but Stannis lived, and he would never forgive fire again. Tyrion, wounded but alive, saved the city. Yet Cersei took the credit. Joffrey rode out the next day, declared a hero without lifting a sword. Sansa saw through it. She saw through all of it now. In the north, word of the Blackwater came too late. Robb had already won more ground, but with every victory came cost. And when he broke his marriage pact to Walder Frey, for love, the trap was quietly laid. Roose Bolton smiled that day. Far from all this, Arya Stark crossed into the Riverlands. She had killed a man, her first. There would be more. She had learned a new prayer, a list of names. Each night she whispered them to herself like a lullaby. Back in Korth, Daenerys looked west and whispered too. Fire and blood, and far, far beyond the wall, something stirred. Not kings, not crowns, something older. The realm had shattered, and no one saw what was coming next. Not the boy king, not the wolf, not the stag, not the dragon, not even the red woman, only the dead.